Hi, my name is Brenda and I live here in Reinholds. I'd like to share with you this morning a bit about how this facility has impacted my life. I was born into a Christian family and I accepted Christ as my Savior at an early age. I was confirmed at 12 and became a member of a mainline denominational church. I was taught biblical principles and spiritual disciplines, but the idea that you could have a personal relationship with Christ was foreign to me. And in my teenage years, I began to notice that many of the adults in my church had lifestyles or attitudes that didn't line up with their Sunday morning persona. And as I struggled myself to live out what I was taught, it seemed like no one else acknowledged this. And I became disillusioned and I stopped attending church. And it would be in my late 20s that my personal life circumstances would drive me to seek God again. And I walked into this building on a Sunday morning and I met Jesus not just as my Savior, but as my friend through the love and acceptance that I received here from His people. And so since I had been baptized as an infant, I participated in believers' baptism and became an active member. And for the next 18 years, I would serve in a variety of capacities here. But most importantly, I developed meaningful and authentic relationships. And it was in that atmosphere that I was able to be transparent. And as I shared my personal struggles, other people sought me out and shared their stories with me. And I began to pray with them and encourage them. And I felt that I had found God's purpose for my life. I started a support group specifically designed for people who were struggling with difficult life circumstances. And even though I was struggling with some really tough things myself, I felt strong in the Lord and empowered by the work that He was doing in and through my life. My entire social and spiritual life revolved around this building. But that was all soon to change. Okay, so after a change in leadership here, the whole atmosphere here began to change. And I was told that I would no longer be permitted to lead the group that had been my passion for the last several years. And some of the people who had attended that group asked me to continue at my home, and I did. And I found out that they were cautioned not to associate with me by leadership. I was devastated and angry and hurt and confused, and I couldn't understand why God would allow this to happen. But I accepted it and I began to look for a new church. And I church hopped for about a year, and then I started to attend a small independent church. But I had difficulty in letting down my guard because I had been hurt so deeply. And I couldn't fully open myself to other people. And it was during that time that my son completed suicide. And when you don't have authentic Christian relationships, you tend to get a lot of Christian platitudes and pat answers in response to your struggles and pain. And I can remember after one such exchange that I became so frustrated and angry that I told God that if I had to hear someone say, God won't give you more than you can handle, or all things work together for the good of those who love Him, I thought I might just explode. It wasn't that I didn't believe those things. And I knew they were meant to be helpful, but all they succeeded in doing was make me feel even more like a failure at living out the Christian life. And so, like Elijah, I ran and I hid and I wanted to die. And I stopped going to church. And it was during that time that I would pass by this building. And I would grieve the loss of my passion and purpose and the real and genuine support I had known here. I had been to the mountaintop. I had experienced the pure joy of seeing God work through my life, and I felt as if I would never find this again. I noticed that this building rarely seemed to be used. And I lamented over the awful waste of all the spiritual, emotional, and financial resources that had been poured into this place by faithful Christians over so many years. And I began to shrivel spiritually. But God wasn't finished with me. It was through my own personal circumstances again that he would move me to seek a place in his church where I could be ministered to. And so I started to visit churches, and I would pass by here and I noticed the coming soon signs. And I thought to myself, when they move here, I'm going to visit. And since I lived close by, I drove by quite often, and it seemed to me that soon wasn't coming very soon at all. And as I drove by one day, I heard God say, well, why do you have to wait? And this wasn't a still small voice. This was loud and clear, like slap you upside the head kind of experience. Why do you have to wait? And so that Sunday, I drove to Gaiman School, and I attended CCC for the first time. I had a divine appointment with God that day. I cried through most of the service. I felt as if the message had been written and spoken directly to me, and I knew that I had found my new spiritual home. Although it would take me some time to get plugged in, I can say to you this morning that I am proud and thankful to be part of a church that recognizes the struggle and faces it head on, all the while seeking to love God fully and love others deeply. I'm especially excited about the opening of the sanctuary, freeing the gym for whatever way God chooses to reach the community here. Seeing this building alive with believers and serving its purpose is evidence of God's great redemptive power and love. He redeems people's circumstances and pain and suffering, and yes, even buildings. Thank you.